the marketing basically suggested that you'd receive up to $1 million if identity was stolen while using LifeLock. In actuality, there were a ton of carve-outs and caveats to this.
I always love it when companies are like, yeah, we're going to do this crazy thing, $1 million if, you're, again, in this case, your identity gets stolen. And it's like impossible to get the money. It's like, oh yeah, if you can get $1 million if someone steals your identity on a Tuesday in March with a full moon and it's snowing out in somewhere in Florida. And you're like, really? Like that was what it took? All right, great. Like
that's it.
Ever wonder what really happens when your rights are violated and what you can do about it? Ever wonder what the law looks like outside of TV dramas and headlines? Meet Quinn Mayberry, a Harvard-trained trial lawyer who has helped individuals recover millions of dollars, and Alex Lobert, Quinn's lifelong friend and your law translator-in-chief, here to make the law make sense. On this show, they cover headline-making legal battles and overlooked cases to show you how to fight back and win. This is Legally Curious.
Quinn, okay, so I need you to imagine something for me. You're the CEO of a security company, specifically an identity theft protection one, all right?
I'm with you.
And you are so confident in your product that you put your social security number out there for the entire world to see. You put it on billboards, you put it on TV commercials, you even paint a truck with your social security number because you're like, you know what? There's no way this could go wrong, right?
Yeah, right. But what could possibly go wrong in this situation? Yeah.
Absolutely right. I mean, the hubris is pretty incredible, but somebody actually did this, right? So Todd Davis, he was the CEO of LifeLock, and he did exactly that. He put his real social security number everywhere, and he was basically daring identity thieves to come after him.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, they did.
So good. I mean, again, like the instant karma is kind of incredible. So at least 13 times, right? So he had his identity stolen. He had like payday loans taken out in his name, credit cards.
Exactly what you would expect to happen if you got your identity stolen. If people stumbled upon your social security number on the dark web.
What was kind of amazing though, right, is yes, this is a great story. The CEO, like hubris of putting his social security number up on a billboard, but that actually isn't the total story here, right? It really is the fact that LifeLock actually just couldn't deliver on anything that they said they could.
Yeah, tip of the iceberg on this one. They got hit with some enormous penalties.
This is going to be a fun episode because we can dive into this a little bit. It is not entirely about Todd Davis being an idiot. However, that's certainly a part of this. I think
we don't shy away from that part of it.
yeah, right. You don't usually get $100 million fines for a product that doesn't work if you're like really on the ball. But it really was about, this became $1 billion company that just couldn't actually deliver on its services.
And then you can't help but ask the question, he created $1 billion company. Who's really the idiot?
I know. That's true. Maybe this is all jokes on us, really.
Okay, one question before we dive into the marketing campaign. Do you remember seeing these?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, okay, so 2 questions. That was a lot. Did you assume it worked? Because I did. I was like, oh, there must be something to this company.
100%.
I'm like, the CEO's plastering his social security number everywhere. He's paying millions and millions of dollars so people know his social security number. There must be something to it. It must basically work.
Right. You would think.
Yeah, exactly. Turns out maybe not. And there's more to the story that we're about to dive into.
Oh, God. Well, how about we start by taking a look at this marketing campaign that started it all.
457-55-5462. If you've ever worried about identity theft, it's time you got to know LifeLock. I'm Todd Davis, and I'm here to prove just how safe your identity can be with LifeLock. That's my real social security number.
You're nuts, man.
Can you believe it?
So if we set some context here, this is a time when just people are really kind of anxious generally. So we're talking about post 9/11. At the same time, everyone is online, some for the first time. So online activity is growing. And there's a lot of fears around things like data breaches.
100%. And to your point about the general anxiety, it's, I think we kind of forget that people were worried about everything from having their water supplies poisoned to data breaches. And Nate Bargatze has a good bit on this, but it's like, we were worried about everything.
Right. So in comes LifeLock, right? And they are selling security.
What they claimed to be selling was proactive identity theft protection. And so the core promise was they monitor, they alert, and they prevent identity theft. And so where we get to the real problem was with that third promise there, where they claim to be preventing the identity theft. And I guess for a little bit more context, the price point is, I believe it was $110 a year for the subscription model. And they ultimately see this explosive growth, over 2 million subscribers by 2012, and the company's valued at over $1 billion. At the center of all of that is this marketing campaign that we've been talking about, where Todd Davis goes everywhere he possibly can and plasters his social security number. He's paying millions of dollars in ads. People are telling him they're trying to pull his ads out the air. He gets a truck and throws his social security number on the back of it. You can't keep this guy's social security number off of anything Todd Davis has his hands on. At the core of the message is, I'm so confident, I'm the biggest target. If it works for me, surely it's more than enough for you.
Again, the audacity is absolutely incredible. But, as we talk about, right, it clearly doesn't work. He gets his identity stolen 13 times.
and again, I don't want to nitpick here, but we're talking about at least 13 times. This is most people, have this big life event where they've had their identity stolen and they have to go and repair their credit, deal with the whole process. It's this big thing times 13.
I know. Right. So the product didn't even work for the CEO. Quinn, do you want to explain, did it work for anybody? Was he just unlucky? Was this like, again, you post this for millions of people, you know what, maybe you get in some trouble, but your average person, like, did it actually help them?
Basically, no. In terms of prevention, the answer is like definitely not. Let's talk about what the product did offer. So they placed fraud alerts. This is a free service anyone can do, but they placed fraud alerts that tell creditors to verify identity before extending credit. So there's this extra little barrier before you can get credit. And you put out that fraud alert where, for one reason or another, you're suspicious people are trying to steal your identity. You make it harder to get lines of credit. Useful tool, but it's not foolproof. And it's definitely not prevention. Key point here, no service can actually prevent identity theft. Something I was unaware of at the time that these commercials were running. I figured they must have some secret sauce there. But they can help you with detection and recovery. Total prevention is impossible unless you just put a full freeze on all lines of credit on your account. Anything shy of that, and even then, I don't know, maybe there are ways people could technically open accounts in your name, but that's about as close as you can get, and you're just preventing yourself from having any active lines of credit, basically. So not what LifeLock was doing, and they weren't living up to this promise.
So they were basically charging people for something they just literally couldn't do, which sounds like it could get them into some legal jeopardy.
Yeah, you would You would hope if we've got a working system.
So what happens, right? So the FTC starts to sniff around this, in large part because the publicity, again, the viral marketing of this was phenomenal, potentially for the wrong reasons, but it meant that it got covered everywhere. Like everyone knew that this guy was getting, payday loans taken out in his name. And apparently the FTC also became aware of this, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's largely true, but initially the ad campaign is working just because people think if he can have a social security number anywhere, it must be working. And so the cracks don't start to show until a little bit later, but enough people subscribe to LifeLock, it becomes this big company, and people start to have problems with identity theft, as of course they will, and problems start to emerge. And this is, I guess, to really understand the FTC's case, we should probably talk about the legal framework a little bit. Quinn here, Section 5 itself and the legal standards haven't changed. What has evolved is how the FTC enforces these rules. There was a Supreme Court case in 2021, AMG Capital Management, that limited some of the FTC's enforcement tools. Congress fixed it, but the LifeLock settlements happened in 2010 and 2015, well before that. The core legal standards we're discussing, still exactly the same today. Back to the show.
All right, Quinn. So let's actually dive in and break down the specifics of what happened at LifeLock and like their deceptive business practices, apparently.
Yeah. So basically, for deceptive advertising, the FTC has to prove three elements. First, that the company made a representation that was likely to mislead a reasonable consumer. Second, that the representation was material and would affect purchase decisions. And third, does the company have reasonable evidence at the time to substantiate their claims? So you can't just make wild claims and then after the fact, try and go back and substantiate them. At the time you're making the claim, you have to have a reasonable basis for doing so.
So they literally had no evidence at all that their product prevented fraud?
Yeah, not really. And certainly not evidence that meets the FTC's standards. So at the time that they were making the claims, they didn't seem to have any testing or studies or data that proved the claims. So it's like, was there any prevention? Didn't seem like it. And even if there was, they certainly didn't have the information necessary to substantiate those claims.
So for those that don't know, I used to be, and kind of a still am, a marketer, and I've marketed for a few Fortune 500 companies. To be clear, I had lawyers read just about everything we put out on websites.
Nerd.
I know, right? No, but it was for this exact reason, right? Because
100%,
you
man.
absolutely, like, if you try to claim something about your product that is not true, is not substantiated by data, then you can get in trouble. And so we spent painstaking amounts of time running studies and experiments and logging when we did them. We had time windows. Like, this is like serious business for most large companies. So for LifeLock, one, not to know this, or at least not to care about this, is pretty galling.
Yeah, and that's great perspective, because this wasn't like a little gotcha moment. This is industry standard and like really well accepted marketing practices. And it's not like they were like skirting up to the line. They were so far over it, it's not even funny.
Yeah, exactly. Any billion-dollar company that doesn't know that lawyers need to, or at least there needs to be some type of review about the type of claims you're making, yeah, that's pretty egregious.
Or like something to generally substantiate the claims you're making. Like,
yeah, right. The CEO's belief doesn't count. So
what happened to America, Alex? What happened to this country?
Truly. So, all right, let's talk about unfair business practices, right? Because those are a little different than deceptive advertising.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the FTC similarly looks at three factors, but they're different factors. So one, does the company practice cause substantial injury? Two, can consumers reasonably avoid it? And three, is the injury outweighed by benefits to consumers? So what they're really looking at here is less about these deceptive advertisements or these false claims, and just more broadly, what's the impact on consumers in the market? Is this ultimately having a negative impact? And we could spend a lot of time breaking this down, but let's skip to the punch here. The answer is yeah, it's probably harmful for consumers.
Quinn, the clearest example of this are these LifeLock fraud alerts. And when I read this, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. They weren't just advertising a product in a way that claimed they couldn't do what they want to do. And it wasn't even really their product couldn't even do what it could do. Not only was it those two facts, but they also were degrading the system for everybody because they had millions of customers and they were renewing these alerts every couple days in such a way that it was overwhelming the system and literally making all of us, even non-customers of LifeLock, less safe. Incredible.
Yeah, pretty much. That pretty well sums it up. I don't have a lot to add here. They made it worse for their own customers, and they had these deceptive claims that they couldn't live up to, but they also degraded the system as a whole by putting out this service that was basically only there for marketing purposes.
So what LifeLock was doing was basically against regulations at the national level, but there also were state policies that they were probably running afoul of too, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so there are oftentimes these state law parallels, and sometimes the states provide even more protection to consumers. So in California, for example, there's the unfair competition law, the UCL, and under Business and Professions Code section 17200, it prohibits unlawful, unfair, or fraudulent practices. And the false advertising law under section 17500 targets misleading advertising. And so there are some other consumer protection laws in California. Basically, every state has some version of this. And the punchline is there can be private rights of action where private individuals can sue under these statutes. So if you're somebody who's been a victim of this deceptive advertising, there's probably some recourse for you.
Okay, so we've got the framework. Basically, LifeLock made unsubstantiated claims. That's deceptive. And then they undermined the fraud alerting system. That's unfair. And they could have faced enforcement from multiple directions, whether it's the FTC or state regulators.
That's exactly right. Or even private individuals suing under these state statutes.
So what happens next?
The FTC steps in. And in 2010, there's this FTC complaint. It's filed in March of 2010, and there are four major allegations. One, false claims about service capabilities. Allegation two, failed to secure customer data, which is a particularly ironic one, that they lacked reasonable and appropriate security measures. I mean, this one jumps out at me every time.
Yeah, I agree. They weren't even good at securing data. That was like their one job. I mean, again, all of this is like spinning, but add cherry on top. They couldn't even safeguard your social security number.
Look, it's hard to run a business, but you got to hope they're trying. All right. Allegation 3, deceptive 1 million service guarantees. So we kind of skipped over this earlier, but they prominently advertised that there was this $1 million service guarantee. And the marketing basically suggested that you'd receive up to $1 million if identity was stolen while using LifeLock. in actuality, there were a ton of carve-outs and caveats to this, and basically it didn't live up to the claim, is the long and short of it.
I always love it when companies are like, yeah, we're going to do this crazy thing, $1 million if, you're, again, in this case, your identity gets stolen. And it's like impossible to get the money. It's like, oh yeah, either you can get $1 million if someone steals your identity on a Tuesday in March with a full moon and it's snowing out in somewhere in Florida. And you're like, really? Like that was what it took? All right, great. Like
that's it. So that didn't pan out. And then finally, allegation 4 is unfair fraud alert practices. And this placed fraud alerts more frequently than allowed, sometimes every 3 days. It violated the credit reporting regulations, and it was harmful to the broader credit ecosystem. So this is what we were talking about earlier, where not only are there all of these problems associated with their product offering for their own consumers, this practice hurts everybody and made everybody a little bit less safe.
So what was LifeLock's argument? How did they possibly try to get out of this?
So they claimed that the marketing was aspirational, not a literal promise, which, I get that defense whenever you're talking about Red Bull gives you wings. They're promising to protect your identity, and their CEO is going on TV giving out a social security number because he claims that he's still safe. It's like very different situation.
Yeah, it's the what do you mean by prevent argument?
No, that's pretty much exactly right. I mean that's the heart of it, and the court says, well, you have to prevent. That's what we mean.
This one's pretty easy. It's like, no, I have my fingers, crossed behind my back. So like doesn't actually hold up in court.
Yeah. And so there are lots of arguments around the edges of the meaning of words. Turns out prevent pretty much means prevent. They also claim that they provided value through convenience and automation. So they said, did we provide prevention? Who knows? But we did provide value. Maybe that's true, but it doesn't excuse the false advertising. So
this doesn't look very good for LifeLock, and all of this leads to a settlement, right?
So they're required to pay a $12 million penalty that's suspended based on the financial position of the company, and they ultimately only end up paying something like $1 million. But they are required to do a lot of specific things. And this is arguably even more important. So they have to stop deceptive claims about preventing identity theft. They have to implement comprehensive information security programs, submit to regular third-party security audits for 20 years. It's also like this is a fraud prevention and awareness company that themselves have to, undergo audits, but they have to clearly disclose service limitations and obtain substantiation before making future claims.
What's incredible is I think all of those would have been great marketing claims if they would have done it. So they were so close. They just had to be compelled to go do it by the FTC. But honestly,
fantastic point. I mean, I'm like,
right.
I want the product more if they do all those things.
I mean, $1 million is a lot of money, but not that bad for a company that, at one point had like 2 million customers. So that can't be why we're talking about this, right?
Yeah, unsurprisingly, you are exactly right, Alex. They did not learn their lesson.
So there's actually another FTC complaint because they kept doing it.
Yeah. So fast forward to December of 2015, and FTC claims that LifeLock had violated the 2010 settlement order. They're still making deceptive claims about preventing identity theft. They still had inadequate data security measures, and they failed to meet the requirements of the 2010 consent order.
Todd Davis, he puts his social security number on a billboard, gets fined by the FTC once, potentially has a chance to like turn the company around and is like, no, I'm doubling down. God, this guy, just
Do you
incredible.
think Todd Davis is the kind of guy to walk away from the table?
I know. He was so sure. He's like, nah, I got this. So like, why would they violate this settlement order?
Yeah, I mean, at the heart of it, it's because these deceptive claims were central to their business model. Without promising prevention, they're basically just an expensive credit monitoring, service. And the company calculated that continued violations were worth it.
That is until they weren't.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Quinn, do you want to talk about the coup de grace here, the $100 million settlement that the FTC imposes?
Largest ever obtained in an FTC consumer protection case at that time, $68 million for consumer refunds, $32 million as a civil penalty for violating the 2010 order, enhanced compliance and monitoring requirements. Although you can't help but wonder, are they going to stick to it now? And why was this so much larger, right? That I think is the obvious question. And the obvious answer is because they violated a consent order. If you're going to violate the settlement agreement and you're not going to take the FTC's enforcement seriously, they're going to get into really big damages territory. And so I think one way you can reasonably think about this is the first settlement is trying to get at behavior modification. The company is providing a service that some people seem interested in. Let's try and change the company's behavior, get them in line with something that's, grounded in reality. The second settlement is punishment and deterrence. They're not taking it seriously. They're not changing behavior. They try and bring down the hammer.
Right. I mean, going from $1 million paid, $12 million settlement to $100 million is a pretty big jump. Let's zoom out, though. What can people actually take away from the LifeLock story?
Yeah, so let's talk about what identity theft services can and cannot do. So what can they do? They can monitor credit reports for suspicious activity. They can alert you when new accounts have been opened or credit checks run. They can provide assistance with recovery process. They can help you navigate the bureaucracy of fixing your credit and offer insurance and reimbursement for some of these costs. Now, what can't they do? They can never entirely prevent identity theft from happening. So if somebody makes that claim where you're going to have your credit open and ongoing, you can open new accounts, no problem, but we're going to prevent identity theft, nobody can do that. Nobody. Somebody makes that broad sweeping claim, you can know from the jump it's untrue.
And I mean, consumers can do a lot for free. Do you want to explain some of the key things you can do as a consumer to protect yourself?
Yeah, of course. So you can place fraud alerts through any of the three major credit bureaus. And basically that just means you're going to get a notification if there's suspicious activity. You can freeze credit at all three bureaus. And that's a more drastic step. But if you're concerned about new accounts being actively opened, you can freeze your credit. You can get an annual credit report for free. You can monitor your own accounts for unauthorized activity and set up alerts with banks and credit card companies. So a lot of what LifeLock was doing, you can do for free. Were they providing some level of automation? Yeah, probably so. Is that worth it to the consumer? I don't know, up to you. But can they provide prevention? Basically, no.
You know whose credit I bet is frozen?
Todd Davis is a cash man. He's a man who buys his cars in cash.
Absolutely. Debit cards only for Todd Davis. All right. So is LifeLock even around today? I'll give a quick update here. They were actually acquired by Symantec in February of 2017 for, get this, $2.3 billion.
Sheesh.
I know. So they later split into two companies. So LifeLock's now owned by Gin Digital, which was formerly Norton LifeLock. And they still operate their theft protection services. Their advertising is dramatically different, so they are much more careful. They actually have marketing lawyers that their teams can talk to, I bet. And they are aggressively focused on monitoring and recovery, not that pesky little problem of prevention, which, as Quinn noted, nobody can do. So huge hedges basically everywhere also like limit and substantiate the claims that they can make. So ultimately, I mean, $100 million, I think that the original, obviously, owners and everyone, that's a pretty hefty penny to pay, but actually ended up doing okay.
Anytime you find yourself feeling bad for one of these companies, check how their arc looks, their company arc. And I think you'll often think maybe the fine should have been even bigger.
Well, it's actually an interesting one. Maybe transition, Quinn, we can kind of start wrapping it up with some of our final thoughts here, because I think that one of the big takeaways that I have around this actually is that it's like this company, to be fair, like borderline ridiculous what they were doing to start. Like the product didn't really work. They were they were lying about what it could do. And, it was actually causing social harm. So like all terrible things. At the same time,
they got them all.
They got a full house of like terrible and deceptive and unfair business practices. But at the same time, the FTC actually almost helped them. I think like that's also what's amazing here. They were forced to reform their data practices. They actually now offer a service that is real. You can decide whether it's worth it or not, but it's like a real service that they can offer. Totally. And they ended up being a company that ended up being rather successful. So I think to our point earlier about arcs of companies, the FTC is not, yes, there's punitive, you should not be doing this, but they're actually trying to make sure that we have companies that serve us and serve us well. And when done well, when regulation is done well, it actually can lead to that.
The long and short of it is I completely agree with your take on this. And I guess just in case it wasn't clear, I think what you're saying is that the FTC's enforcement actually helps the business. And that's exactly right. It's not, I think that some of these claims that, the regulations just need to get out of the way, not only is that worse for consumers, but as much as LifeLock didn't want this enforcement, it's actually better for the company too. And so the only people this isn't better for are just like wildly fraudulent companies, or, if the FTC becomes weaponized. But it's anything shy of that, and this is essentially better for everybody across the board.
So Quinn, one thing we didn't talk too much about, given we were focused on the FTC and the regulation side of it, people could sue these companies too, right? So you actually can take individual action as well. Do you want me to talk about like how you think about that and what would be the situations where you like create a personal claim?
Yeah. So I guess first and foremost, you already hit it. You can sue these companies for false advertising under certain state consumer protection laws. So you as an individual, it doesn't have to be the state AG. You can hire an attorney and go sue them. There are attorney's fees provisions that level the playing field. So you don't need to be wealthy to bring these lawsuits. If it makes sense, you're either going to be partnering up with an attorney on a contingency fee basis, where they take some portion of the settlement, or sometimes there are actually statutory fee shifting provisions where the other side, if you win, has to pay your attorney's fees. Class actions and private enforcement keep companies honest whenever the government can't. And that's something that we've talked about a bit on this on this show, and it's, I'm not coming to this with an entirely neutral perspective. I'll fully concede that. I think that when we're talking about the relationship between consumers and large corporations, there is inherently this power imbalance. And so the beauty of a class action is it can help level that playing field where all of the consumers can come together and bring an action and use that collective power against a large corporation. But I guess the last thing I'll say is you got to know your rights under these laws or reach out to an attorney who will, because without knowing what you can do, it feels pretty helpless and you're not going to take any action or take the next step. So either find a good lawyer or watch shows like Legally Curious and learn about your rights a little bit.
Exactly. Because right. The FTC has a lot of power and they were able to bring a $100 million settlement. However, individuals have a lot of power too. So as Quinn said, you can talk to a lawyer, you can actually join class actions. You can also make lying expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this one was a lot of fun. I don't know if I feel safer or less safe. I'm not 100% sure coming out of this one. But definitely I feel a little more informed about what happened with LifeLock.
Perfect. And I don't know, man. I look up to it's funny. It's hard to know what lesson to take from an example of Todd Davis. It's what a bold visionary. I
know. What a bold visionary. And we will put our social security numbers in the first comment below. No, I was kidding. Absolutely not. All right. Quinn, this has been a joy. Thank you for another wonderful episode of Legally Curious. And we'll see you next week.
Always a good time, Alex.
All right.
I'll see you then.
See ya.
Bye.
If your rights have been violated, give Mayberry Law a call at 310-776-3764. It's free, and we would love to discuss what you can do. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice or create an attorney-client relationship. For specific legal guidance, consult a qualified attorney.